everybody, what's up? Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. My name is Kristen, and today we're going to do a crazy neighbor story time while I eat some Fazolis. I just dropped my oldest boy off for preschool. My youngest one is in his jumper watching some TV, so you might hear a little bit of Disney Channel, some puppy dog pals, and you might hear some bouncing or some giggles and laughter because he's in his jumper. So letting you know what's going on, or you can hear my dog slurping water because I'm filming, so of course he needs to do that. Anyway, I ordered a side Caesar salad. Looks very dinky. And I also ordered their chicken carbonara. Am I saying that right? It looks good. We've got some breadsticks here, and we've got the pasta, which is nice and warm. I always thought carbonara was like a cold pasta dish, but it is warm, and it looked amazing on their sign, so I am very excited. Oh, he's gonna itch now, of course. Do we just need to make all the noises? You're gonna bark and howl a little too. Maybe do a little bit of bang. You gonna go eat your food? Huh? So, anyways, this looked really good on their sign. If I can open it. Oh my god. There we go. It's like suctioned on. That's what it looks like. Oh, it smells amazing, y'all. It smells amazing. Whew. So, when it comes to this neighbor story time, where'd my fork go? I just brought a fork in. Fork. And a Coke, which is huge. I ordered I thought a medium? Maybe I ordered a large. Maybe they mixed it up. Maybe this is their medium. I don't, that's big though. Let's go ahead and get a bite real quick. So when it comes to this neighbor story time video, it was a request from a few of you subscribers. So thank you. And I'm listening when you guys ask for things. I can't remember who made the request. I have an image of your thumbnail in my mind, but I'm not sure it's the right person. But anyways, I'm listening to you guys when you make requests. I do try to make them happen. So here we are. I'm gonna get a bite. This smells so good. It's got noodles with Alfredo sauce, grilled broccoli, chicken, and bacon. That is so good. If I get it in my mouth, maybe something there will work for a thumbnail. We'll see. Okay, so for this neighbor story time, as a lot of you know, if you've been following me for a while and have seen my vlogs, I have some crazy neighbors. They are alcoholics. I mean, I'm self-diagnosing them, but if you've seen how often they came back and forth from the liquor store, you would make the same assumption. The same with everything that goes on. But what I was gonna say is that I film with my cell phone, and so I had a whole list of everything on my phone of stories I wanted to talk about that's gone on with these folks. There's like a big black, I think this is a UPS truck. Big truck just pulled out in front of my house. So anyway, I had a whole list of things to talk about, but I'm going to try to play it by memory because my list is on my cell phone, but I film with my cell phone. If I'd been smart about it, I would have wrote everything down. Okay, so not all of these stories are going to be my neighbors that are the alcoholics. Most of them will be, but there are a couple of stories that are from some other neighbors around us. Sorry if that was weird. I'm trying to get something for a good screenshot. Like, for a thumbnail. This is so good. I'm trying to see if they're delivering something to my house. I don't think we've ordered anything. These breadsticks are amazing. They're buttery and flaky. and warm. So, first little story time. There's a noodle fall in my hand. Random. It was on my shirt. Why don't you guys tell me I had a noodle on my shirt, huh? So first little story time. This one involves some folks who live across the big highway from me. It's kind of confusing how to set up this like neighborhood. But like my town was founded in like the 1800s or 1700s or something like that. And so this main road that cuts right through my neighborhood, I'm not really sure if it used to just be like a regular road and then it became a main road or what, but my neighborhood is on both sides of this. It's not really considered a highway, but we have enough traffic on it to call it a highway. I call it a highway. I'm scared to cross it on foot. There's too much traffic. So it's really set up like a road. Anyways, none of this really matters. But these folks live across, like I live on a side street that cuts off from this main highway. These folks live on the other side of the highway, right along the highway. But where I'm at, like I can look across the highway and see their house. Hopefully that makes sense. None of it really matters to this story. So I start hearing yelling and screaming going on. And I am the quintessential nosy neighbor. I hear yelling and screaming. I start looking out my windows. I go out front, I go out back. I'm like, what is going on? I am the nosy neighbor. Side story. There were some folks who used to live across the street from us who got a bunch of their stuff repoed, and I sat there and gave my husband the play-by-play as everything came out of the couch. I was like, oh, or out of the couch, out of the house. I was like, oh, they had a nice leather sofa, and oh, they just took out their footstool. It was Rent-A-Center pulled up. It was like repoing their stuff and left. At least I think they were repoing it. And the same thing happened to my drunk neighbors with a sound system, but that is a whole other story for a whole other time. Well, we'll get there. This is the time, but we're not on that story just yet. Maybe we'll tell that one after this one. So, dude, what are you chewing? Hey, come back here. I don't know where he found a piece of plastic at, but he was munching it. So anyways, neighbors across from the highway. Yelling and screaming. I step out front. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's a lot of yelling and screaming. There is a lady on her front porch. She's holding her cell phone. This house is just to paint the picture, and if you've been with me for a long time, you already know this, but if you're new, just stumbled on this video, I do live in a very low-income neighborhood, and I feel like that's why a lot of what we see and hear going on is not kept behind closed doors. I think that domestic violence and abuse happens across all walks of life, no matter how much money you have, but I feel like folks who are a little more wealthy do a lot more of their domestic violence things indoors. I don't know how else to describe it other than I don't think you'd see a lot of this stuff happening in a wealthier neighborhood. That's not to say that's not happening, I just think it's not happening on the front lawn. So, this lady is sitting on her chair in the front of her house with her cell phone, and there's a guy outside with her too. And she just periodically she's acting really weird. Like there's just not something quite going on right in her head. Like her movements, okay? Like I can't understand what they're saying. I could just hear all the yelling and screaming. And it's like she'd go off on him and then sit down in her chair. And then she'd go off on him and sit down in her chair. And sometimes she'd get up and at one point was yelling and screaming at him and started just launching lawn chairs at him, like off their front porch. And they had like a lot of stuff on their front porch. It wasn't just furniture. It was a bunch of just stuff. Like little tables and like, I don't even know. I don't even know what all was up there. She just started launching things at him. And he's just kind of blocking it. And like as he'd catch something or block something, he'd pick it up and put it back where it's supposed to be or kind of put it down. And she just walk around yelling, screaming, throwing things at him. And then she gets quiet and goes and sits down. And then she'll turn around and get up and start yelling and screaming at him again. And of course he's talking to her through all of this, but it seems like he is being fairly calm, trying to handle her. Kind of like if you imagine somebody's having a psychotic break that you know and you're trying to keep them calm. Like, that's kind of the feeling I was getting from all this. But she just kept yelling and screaming at him. And it was getting, like I said, it was getting to be a lot when she was throwing things across the lawn at him and launching them at his face and just, It was a show. And so at one point, he finally walks inside the house. And I don't know if he locked her out or what it was, but she started banging on the door, yelling and screaming, yelling and screaming. And I'm not kidding, she just went down. Like, I don't even know how she passed out. Like, I mean, she was yelling and screaming pretty good, but I wouldn't think it was enough for her to not have enough air to make her pass out. Like, I don't know. She was just yelling and screaming and beating on the door. And then just down. Just down. There was no, like, hesitation. There was no back off. There was no, oh, I'm getting dizzy. It was just, la, 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 and then down. Like, I was like, what the fuck just happened here? And I kid you not, he opens up the front door and he grabs her by her ankles and pulls her back inside the house. At that point, I called the police because I'm like, you literally just drug her in by her ankles and shut the door. Like, anything could be happening in there, and she's unconscious as far as I was aware. So I call the police. Before the police get there, he leaves. I'm assuming maybe his mom pulls up in the driveway. I only say that because she was like an older lady, so I'm like thinking maybe it's his mom. He gets in the car and he leaves. She comes out of the house, still just kind of acting weird in her movements. I don't know how else to describe it other than her movements were weird. Kind of choppy, not quite normal. And I wouldn't have thought anything of it if I hadn't just witnessed this whole fight they just had. It just kind of made me think like maybe she's having a psychotic break or maybe she was on something. I don't know. But she walks around to the side of her house and plops down in a heap. And is just sitting there when the cops pull up. And the cops come up and start talking to her. And then she walks around to the back of the house. And then I don't know what happened from there. I couldn't see the rest of it. All I hope is that she got help. I just hope she got help. So, story number 1. If you guys are eating with me, what are you eating? I want to know. Last time I did a Q&A, I think it was a Q&A mukbang. Some of you guys were actually eating Chipotle with me, which I thought was kind of cool. These breadsticks, you guys, amazing. So, story time number 2. The folks directly across the street from me, they moved in after folks who got their stuff repossessed. At least that I assume got their stuff repossessed. So I don't really know their family dynamics. I never met them. I've just seen them coming and going. And when they all first moved in, I thought maybe this house was, I don't know, would you call it a duplex? Like one of those. It's a big house. And you know how sometimes big houses get turned into like apartments. So you got like something on top, something on bottom, something like that. Because there was an older guy, and I use that loosely, but he looks like he's maybe in his 50s, who would come and go out of the front of the house. And then there was a family who I'd see come out the back a lot of the times. It was a lady, a man, and two little girls. And they had the kids playing in the back a lot. Well, then I started noticing that the older guy would come and go out the back too. So it started making me question if the house wasn't all one actual home and not an apartment. Which now I believe it is all one thing. I don't think it was ever an apartment, but originally I wasn't sure. So I believe what the family dynamic is that I believe you have the small family of the mom, the dad, and the 2 kids. And then I believe the husband's father lives with them. That's my thoughts. Could be completely wrong. I've never met these people. But I assume that because we started hearing some fighting here and there from that house, and then all of a sudden the lady like disappeared, and you hardly ever see her. And I feel like you don't see the kids a whole lot either. Well, one day, this has been a while, a lot of these stories, like I've been in my house for 5 years. So a lot of these stories are like not recent things. They've been a cumulus over time of things that have just happened since living in this neighborhood. I start hearing a whole bunch of yelling and screaming. I'm like, what the hell is going on, you know? So I open my front windows because the screaming sounded like it was a lot closer. Sound travels weird around here. Sometimes you hear something and you'll think it's in the front and it's actually in the back. It can be weird. So I'm hearing the fighting and I just open up my front window and I'm looking out and I'm like, what is going on? And this is kind of like, it's getting on to evening time. So I don't think they can see me watching them. So there is the mom, I'm assuming the mom, and she is yelling and screaming with the grandpa, is what we'll call him, I guess. And then you have the dad there, and he's getting into a fight with some other guy who pulled up in a car with mom. And they're like throwing fists, yelling and screaming at each other. And then you have another older lady who's there, whom I'm assuming is the mother of the younger mom. Does that make sense? So we've got grandpa and mom, sorry, we got grandpa and son and the 2 kids, and then who all in the house. And then you've got grandma and the mom and mama's boyfriend, I'm assuming. And they're all yelling and screaming and fighting each other in this yard. Mama, or the baby daddy and the mama boyfriend are like throwing fists at each other, like full on duking it out. And then I start hearing grandpa start yelling at grandma about like, get off my property. Well, he's yelling at all of them, but he's saying, get off my property. I pay for this place. I pay the bills. Get out of my yard. Like he's trying to break it up. And he's telling everybody to leave. Get off my property. I pay the bills. You can't be here. I'm going to call the cops. Leave. And grandma looks at him and says, you can't make me leave, and sits down in the middle of this guy's backyard. And he has a small yard with chain link fence, and everything is taking place in the backyard, which faces my house. So I was able to like see all of it. And I about cracked up laughing. Like, how do you sit down in the middle of a man's yard when this ain't even your fight and say you can't make me leave? And I kid you not, after everybody else left, like got in vehicles and left, grandma just kept sitting in the backyard. And like, we're not talking grandma and grandpa together. No, we're talking like probably the same grandparents to the children, but like baby daddy's dad and baby mama's mom. You know, like that's my assumptions here. It could be wrong. But like every now and then I would hear his yelling and I'd look outside and that grandpa guy would come back outside. He's like, get out of my yard. She's like, you can't make me. Just still sitting in his yard. And he never called the cops. And eventually I guess she did leave. But that went on for probably an hour or more where I would hear yelling, get up and look. And like I said, everybody else had left. She's still just sitting in his backyard, like in a heap on the ground. And I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Baby mama and baby mama boyfriend done left the house. Like, why is baby grandma still sitting in the yard? I don't understand these folks. But that's my only stories with those people. Things have been pretty quiet with them. Same with the folks from across the street who I did call the cops on. Things have been quiet all the way around. I don't know what was going on with the people across the street, but things have been quiet. You still see like baby mama come and go now, but like she's either getting the kids or dropping them off. Like things seem to have settled, which is good. For the kids' sake, it's good. So, about 2 years ago now, my drunk neighbors had, and they're the ones right next door to me, where they are now. There used to be a house in between. That house caught fire. We bought the property, had the house demolished, and put in a privacy fence. So the people next door to us now are our drunk neighbors, who we never realized were drunks until there was no property between the two of us and we could hear everything. Never realized how much of a sound buffer was there, because these folks have lived in their house for 11 years. And I talked to my elderly neighbor across the street about it one time, and she said, oh yeah, when they were younger, they used to have cops coming and going all the time there. She's like, they've been at it like this forever. So, and things apparently have calmed down in recent years, because they don't have cops out there all the time anymore. But they still yell and scream and fight with each other a lot. So they, at some point, had gotten some kind of a subsystem in their house. I don't exactly know what you would call it. It looked like the kind of speakers you would see at like a high school dance. It was probably stacked about 2 to 3 tall, and they were probably 5.5, 6 foot tall speakers. And I kid you not, for 3 days straight, these folks blared their music to the point it was vibrating our house. Day and night, 24 hours a day for 3 days straight. Did not turn it off. We should have called the police on them. We didn't, because I don't know why we didn't. For a while, we were trying to be friendly with these folks, and then we just finally realized, like, they just a special kind of crazy, and we're just leaving it alone. Like, I used to go out of my way to be extra nice to them, and I still try to be nice to them. They don't realize that they annoy us the way that they do. We've never, like, had a confrontation with them, mostly because they are very confrontational people with each other. I can only imagine how they would get with somebody who is not their family, if they're going to fight that bad with somebody who is their family. So, and since we have to live next door to them, we don't trust that they wouldn't, like, vandalize property or cause damages. So we're just trying to keep the peace and keep our noses out of it as much as we can. And so for a while there, we just ignored a lot of what was going on because we didn't want to ruffle any feathers. And so we didn't call the police when they had the subsystem going. So to paint a little better picture of folks living in this house, you have the mom and the dad who rent the place out. And I don't want to say names just on the off chance that one of their kids finds this video and realizes I'm talking about their family. So you have the mom and dad who rent out the house. It is a rental property. They've been there for 11 years, probably closer to 12 or 13 at this point. And they are, I'm going to guess, in their late 40s, early 50s. Then they have one son who is, to my understanding, not biologically the mom's. It's the dad's oldest boy from a different relationship. Could be wrong, but that's my understanding. Because I used to try to build a friendship with the lady. We'll call her J. We'll call them C and J because of what their names actually are. So you got J, which is the lady, and C, who is the man. They're in their 40s to 50s. They've got an older son who is C's son from a previous marriage or relationship. And then you have another son and daughter, which C and J share together. But they all live in this house. The oldest son is probably close to my age, guessing just by looks at him. I could be wrong on that. He might be older, he might be younger, but I'm gonna guess he's close to my age. I do know that their youngest daughter just graduated high school because they hung out a congratulations grad balloon on their back porch back in June, which wrapped around their power line and is still hanging out there, and it is almost November, so just throwing that out there. I think it's a little weird that they left that out for so long. And then their youngest boy graduated high school about 3 years ago now. So that would make him 2021, my guess is. now that you kind of understand the family dynamics, you also need to recognize that C and J, to my understanding, are alcoholics. We're not far from a liquor store. It is within walking distance. And every day, starting at about 8 in the morning when the liquor store opens, they start walking back and forth, carrying cases of beer. I know that C likes to drink, I think it's Bud Light, it comes in a blue case. And I know that J likes to drink, I believe, Coors Light. It comes in like a gray case. And that's only from 5 years of watching them walk back and forth every day with cases of beer. And we're talking big cases, like probably a 24-pack. Every day, 1 per. And then throughout the day after that, they're back and forth getting bottles of who knows what. They carry it in brown paper bags by the neck. And it's back and forth all day, every day. It's sad, if we're being honest. That's not a good way to live. So, anyways, I don't know when it came to that subsystem whose it belonged to, if it was one of the kids, if it was the parents. I don't know why the parents who were renting out the house would let their kids blare it for 3 days straight unless they were enjoying it too. But it was nonstop for 3 days straight. And then somebody, not us, finally called the cops on them and they shut it off. But 3 days straight with the subsystem going, and it was shaking our walls because it was turned up so loud. And to kind of further things, we sit on almost half an acre now that we've bought the property next door and had it demolished. And so with how everything sits with the yards, we probably have a fourth of an acre between the two of us, maybe closer to a third. And so that's how, I can't imagine how it was for the folks on the other side of them who are right next door, who practically share a driveway. Like, I couldn't imagine how bad that had to be for them. If it was shaking our walls and we had that much space between the two of us. And like I said, we should have called the cops, but we never did because we didn't want to get anybody in trouble. Maybe this would have been better told not as a mukbang. I don't know. Oh my goodness! We're not gonna do that. So, do you need to go to bed? Do you need to go take a nap? So, other stories we can talk about with these folks. No particular order here on most of these. Last year, we had, I think it was last year, pretty sure. Last summer, not this past summer, summer before, 2019, summer 2019. Son number 1 and baby mama, his baby mama, were fighting all the time. I can't tell you how many times it'd be the middle of the night and we would start hearing yelling and screaming. A lot of times, mother would get involved. Jay, she would be out there yelling and screaming at baby mama too. There was one time when they were fighting in their driveway, which was on the opposite side of the house from us. They must have been doing it in front of the car in the driveway, and the car in the driveway had its headlights on, which were shining onto the garage. And from where our house sits, we could see the front of the garage. And so they were between the car and the garage. Couldn't see them, but we could see their shadows on the garage because of the headlights of the car. And they're yelling and screaming at each other, and we see them from the shadows start throwing punches at each other. So they're out there full on fighting. Now, I don't know who was hitting who. I don't know if it was son number 1 and baby mama throwing punches. I don't know if it was Jay and baby mama throwing punches. That's who I think it was. But they were out there having a full-on brawl, like throwing punches at each other, yelling and screaming. Then a little later on, and that was all summer long. It was the only time we've seen them hitting each other. I'm sure it happened more than that. The only time we actually seen it, and even though we didn't see them, we've seen the reflection or their shadows fighting. So lots of times you just hear them yelling and screaming, fighting with each other. You don't necessarily see anything. So another time last year, son number 1 and baby mama were fighting with each other. I was watching this one. They were out front. Actually, I wasn't watching. My husband was watching it. I could hear it, but I wasn't watching. My husband was. They're yelling and screaming and fighting with each other. And son 1 goes to, like, no, baby mama gets in her car. She's like a little yellow, she's a little yellow car. I can't remember what they're called. A little 2-door yellow sports car. She gets in it to leave. And son 1 tries to stop her by getting in front of the car. She's yelling at him to leave and or like to get out from in front of her car, and he won't do it. And so she tries to speed off and hits him. He rolls over the top of her car off the back end. Like, she drug him for a little while, because when I heard my husband say, oh, she just ran him over, I went outside, because at this point I was still trying to be friends with Jay. So I run down to Jay, who's like on the like sidewalk crying and holding her cell phone and just shaking. And she's like, she ran him over. And son 1 is gone, and yellow car is a little ways down the street. And C had walked down the street to see how his son was, and then came walking back towards the house with him. Son was hobbling really bad. There was blood all down his leg, a big gash. I'm pretty sure there was bone. I wasn't looking too closely after I thought I seen bone. I was like, I'm done with that. I'm gonna stop watching that. And baby mama left. Just left. So the ambulance comes pretty quickly, because I called the police. I'm sitting out in the front yard, like, trying to console my neighbor, and she's crying about how her son just got hit. And C loads his son up in the car into the ambulance, and they leave. They take him. And my thoughts is, like, for sure baby mama is gonna get arrested. Like, she just ran him over and then left. Like, right? Well, not, and I'm pretty sure her kids were in the car. I'm pretty sure the kids who are little, they're like my oldest son's age, like 4 and under, 5 and under. They're little kids. She's like 3 or 4 of them. Were in the car and seen this. Horrible stuff for a child to see. And so the cops show up, I think right after the ambulance leaves. I don't remember the cops being there when the ambulance was. I think they pulled up after. I gave a statement and I went back home, because it seemed like they all need to handle their stuff, and plus baby mama showed back up. Like, I don't know if she just went around the block or what, but she left. Ambulance came and got baby daddy, and then cops showed up, and then she showed up. And they were taking the statements and everything, and I thought for sure she would get arrested. Did not get arrested. The only thing that happened was, I'm assuming her mom got called to come and pick up the kids, because them kids were popping out of her car like it was a clown car. She had to have, pretty sure she's got 4 of them. She had 3 in the back seat and 1 in the front seat with her, and they were all under 5. And so her mom came to get the kids, and she showed up with like a van, and they were pulling car seats out of the car and stuff. Like, she just didn't have them properly in the car. So I don't exactly know what was going on with all that. I didn't ask. I didn't feel like it was my place to ask. I'm too full to eat this. I'm gonna put this in the refrigerator, because I feel stuffed. So I didn't ask. Piece of bacon. Don't waste bacon. So it was insanity. Looking back, I'm gonna say that baby daddy did not have his leg broken. I remember thinking I seen bone, but now that I look back on it, I mean, I remember him having his leg and like him being on crutches and having something on his leg for a little while, but it wasn't no like 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Like, it was just for like a few days to a week or something. It wasn't very long, so he must not have broke it. But his jeans were pretty good, and there was a lot of blood. And I thought I seen a bone, but again, I wasn't getting anywhere too close to find out for sure. So, same summer, I started hearing a bunch of fighting again. It's son one, you know, baby daddy, and baby mama. What are we doing, Bean? What? I'm gonna tell you this story and then I'm gonna put them to bed. So they're yelling and screaming with each other. I look out my kitchen window. At this point, we do not have a privacy fence. And they're yelling and screaming at each other. And the kids, she's trying to put the kids in the back of her little yellow sports car. And then I watch as baby daddy tries to pull one of the kids out of the back. And so he's got a hold of the kid from like one arm. And baby mama turns around and snatches the kid and pulls on the kid. So now the kid is kind of dangling between the two of them. And I kid you not, they're playing tug of war with their child who can't be more than 3 or 4. And at that point, I'll call the police. Because I'm like, okay, it's one thing if you want to throw punches at each other. It's one thing if you want to run each other over. This might have happened before they ran each other open, or it might have happened shortly after. I can't remember, but it happened pretty close together. And again, summer 2019, these folks are just fighting all the time. It's like one day you'd see them snuggling on the couch, and that evening they'd be like throwing punches at each other. Like it was constant fighting. But they're full on playing tug of war with their child. Like one has one arm, one has the other, and they're pulling back and forth on this kid. So I call the police. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was settled. It didn't really look like anything happened. Or maybe, I think that was the time that the mom got called out to take the kids. I'm getting things mixed up because so much has happened, and it happened like a year or more ago. Things have really quieted down with them since, for the most part. At least from what I can tell. I mean, they still fight and stuff, but it's not wild fights that I'm seeing like it was a couple of years ago. So I think that this happened on a different day where they were playing tug of war with their kid. Called the cops. Cops came out to see what was going on, and they called baby mama's mama to come out with a money van to take the kids. And I thought for sure like they would confiscate the children, because at one point the kids all got taken and put in the back of police cars. Which I felt bad about, because I'm like, I don't want them like going into child protective services, but like you also can't sit there and play tug of war with your child who's like 4 and dangling in the air while one parent has an arm and the other parent has an arm, and they're pulling, trying to grab the kid. And of course, trying to get a hold of the kid didn't last long. One of the parents ended up snatching the kid, and I don't remember if the kid got put down or put in the car, but it wasn't good. You know, that was a hard thing to see. And so cops came out, took care of all that, and I'm gonna go put my kid to bed for a nap, and I'll be right back with you. Okay guys, let's continue with the story. So, another incident with my neighbors. Let's see. They stole my trash can. So, we get city trash cans, and I'm only explaining this because I know some folks watch who are not in the United States. And so things might work differently in your country. So I know anyone in the U.S. who has public trash removal is kind of like, I get how the trash works, you know. But for anybody who doesn't have an understanding of it, you know, we typically have, here in the U.S., we have public trash, which means you have a trash truck comes around and picks up your garbage, and the city issues you a trash can. At least in my city. I know some places you have to buy your own trash can, but in my city they issue you a trash can and a recycling bin. So, and that's what you put out to the curb, and that the city comes through and takes your trash. Well, when we bought the house that had the fire, that meant that we got the trash cans with it, and we had the house demolished because it had a fire, and we were just buying it to expand our yard. So, before we ended up putting, I don't want to say a bid, but before we talked to the owners about buying it, we had been talking to our other neighbors, the ones I've been telling you guys about, and during the fire, and I've got other videos on this fire if you guys are curious, I can leave links below, but just by the grace of God, our house was not touched, which is insane to me because our house sat closer to the house that had the fire than our neighbors did. But our neighbors had parts of their siding start to melt off, and their city trash can started to warp and melt just from the heat of the flames. And again, we sit closer. They had a whole driveway between them and that other house. Us, the houses were so close that you could barely put a car between the two of them. You could probably drive between the two, but it would be a tight squeeze. And you definitely couldn't put a car sideways between the two houses. And so for us to have 0 damage and them to have damage was kind of an insane and crazy thing, and it was a complete miracle for us that we had no damage. So we were all standing in front of the house talking about the fire, and our neighbor commented on how the firehouse, the trash can that went with that house, its trash can didn't have any damage, which I thought was odd, but and that's the other weird thing, is most of the fire was on the front of the house, the upstairs of the house, and over by our house. And then the part of the house that wasn't on fire was between my neighbors, like was on my neighbor's side. So it's really, really just odd and strange how it worked out that they had parts of their house melting off and we had nothing. So their trash can was tucked up along the side wall that did not have any fire damage, which was between the firehouse and my neighbors. And so we were out there talking, and of course at this point my husband and I have privately been talking about seeing if we could buy the property and what the owners would want for it, just to get them out from under it. But we hadn't talked to them about buying it yet. So we're outside talking to the neighbors, and we're all looking at the house and just talking about, you know, everything that happened, and probably the night that it happened, because everybody came running out of their houses. We're all running up and down their streets. My husband's in his boxers. C is in his boxers. They're all talking about how they thought their house was on fire when they evacuated, how they got their kids out. We're talking about how we thought that our house was the one on fire and trying to get our kids out. And so we're just all out there talking about the night that it happened. And that's when they start talking about how their city trash can started melting. And so I made the comment of, well, before anything gets done, you should just swap the trash cans. Which to me seemed fair and made sense, because city trash cans, getting things replaced is expensive. It can be upwards of $300. They're not cheap to replace. And I made the comment of, you should just swap the trash cans. Well, then it came out like a week or so later that we were going to buy the property. We got in touch with the owners. We'd made a deal with them to buy the property, and we got everything worked out. So we bought the property, and the people who had been renting it were fully moved out at that point, and we were just going in there and cleaning anything out that was salvageable that the renters had left behind. And one of the things I went to go take was the city trash cans. I was most interested in the recycling bin, and thankfully that's the one that we got, but I noticed that the actual city trash can was gone and that my neighbors had it. They had the city trash can and their trash can. And so I went over to ask, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to get my trash can, you know, because we just bought the property. And that's the first time that I realized that these folks could be aggressive. We didn't realize how much these people fought with each other prior to the house fire, for that fire between us. I am amazed at how much of a noise buffer having that other house there was, because we had no idea that these people were so aggressive and fought with each other so much until there's vacant space and we could hear it. And like I mentioned, sound travels weird around here. So I'm sure there was times when we heard things and we just didn't know where it was coming from, and it was probably them. And sorry about my kiddo. I put him in for his nap, and he's starting to fuss a little bit. So he may just take a little bit to settle down, and I'm sure hearing me talk is probably not helping. So she starts getting a little aggressive with me with her tone of voice, and was like, that's my trash can. The city gave that to me. That's my trash can. I'm like, okay, you can have it. Like, I wish I would have had more of a backbone and stood up for myself, because there are serial numbers on these trash cans, and we could have, called the police if we had to take it that far. But at that point, I kind of felt like she was my friend. We used to sit around and talk and chat, and she came over to visit after I had Levi, my oldest son, and we even like sat on the front porch and held him. And like, I didn't realize what kind of people these folks were until that house was gone. And that's when we started noticing how much they were back and forth to the liquor store, how much they were drinking, how much they were fighting with each other, how much they were smoking weed, which I don't care if you smoke weed, but man, they smoke some stinky shit, and it blows into our yard all the time. And it's not like we didn't smell it before, but I always thought it was the house next door, because there are stories about those people too. So I backed down, and I wish I hadn't. Another thing that we went to take off the house was they had a pretty nice garden hose reel. I don't know what you call it, but it's one of those things you like reel your garden hose onto and store it. I hope that makes sense. And I went to go take that because we don't have one. I was like, oh sweet, we get a garden reel, you know. So I'm unhooking the hose from the house and taking it all off. And that's when my neighbor comes around and goes, "That's mine. I let them borrow that. That's mine." It was very insistent that it was hers. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, just have it. Just take it." Again, not having a backbone. And she was coming at me very aggressively about it and very demanding. And I'm just like, "Okay, take it. Don't fight me." Like, I didn't understand the aggression here. And so I backed down and let him have it. And so that was our first experience, our run-in with them, and that's the only one we've had. Like I said earlier in this video, was seeing how aggressive and hateful they get with each other. I'd hate to see what they do with somebody who they don't love, because they get nasty with each other. Just the yelling and screaming and the fights we've seen, they get crazy with each other. So let's see about another one. So we can talk a little bit about the folks who used to live in the house that had the house fire. At least the original set of neighbors. When we moved in, we had one set of neighbors, and then they got evicted, and we had a whole other set of neighbors move in before the fire happened. So the folks who lived there originally, they would yell and scream and fight with each other a lot. And so that's probably where we missed a lot of the fighting from the folks who are now our neighbors, because the folks who were originally our neighbors, the husband and wife that lived there, would fight a lot, like a lot, like knock down, drag out, yelling and screaming, fights. We even seen them in the street one time fighting with another lady, and the husband punched this other lady in the face. They would just go at it. And sometimes the husband of the next door neighbor, and then of our now neighbors, like they would stand in the road and fight with each other. So we knew, like, they seemed like they were friends. They were always palling around, and then other times we'd see them outside yelling and screaming and fighting with each other. So it was all a little weird. Well, one time, I was sitting on my front porch, and the way my front porch is set up, there's kind of like a wall that juts out from my house, and so I can be sitting on the porch, but have this wall here so like nobody can see me. And my neighbors were sitting on their front porch, and I could hear them. And I could hear the husband yelling and getting upset at the wife. And then, I can't remember verbatim what this was, and this has been over 4 years ago, maybe pushing 5 years ago. I hear him say something along the lines of, "I will take this gun and shoot you in the face." And I know what I heard. At the time, I knew exactly what I had heard. I knew what I heard. But at the time also, I thought that me and Jay were friends. Like, I had no idea what was going on down there, right? Like, we would sit and talk and chat and visit, and like, I thought she was a lovely person. And I knew that she, or at least her husband, was friends with the husband of the guy who lived in the house that had the fire. So I talked to her about it, and I was like, "This is what I heard," and I couldn't believe I heard that, because I always thought that guy was, fairly nice, and like, I was just so surprised. And then what do you know, a few hours later, he comes down knocking on my door, and he's like, "I just want to clear some things up. You must understand what you heard. I was talking about having guns put to my own head, And I'm like, I did not disagree with him or tell him he was wrong. I just kind of went with it and was like, "Okay, so sorry, And that's the same time when I was told that we don't call cops around this neighborhood. We take care of things ourselves. If there's ever an issue, you need to come and talk to us. It was a whole thing. Because I mentioned to Jay, I didn't know if I should call the cops. Like, was he going to shoot? Like, I had no idea that they had those kind of problems. Yeah. And they came down and specifically told me, "We don't call the cops in this neighborhood. If you have problems, you come and talk to us." And he was like, "What you heard was me telling my wife about how I had somebody put a gun to my head." And I'm like, "I swear." And that's not what I said to him. I was like, "Okay, sounds great. Just get off my lawn. Leave me alone." But I swear to goodness, what I heard was him say, "I will put a gun in your face and I will shoot you." I swear that's what I heard. And again, those people we pretty much avoided because we seen what they were doing. They were back and forth to the liquor store all the time too. But they would fight with each other, hardcore yelling and screaming. I felt horrible for their teenage daughter. You'd see her sitting outside a lot of the times trying to get away from it. But it was a small house, and like I said, our houses were super close together. So I could just be in my bedroom with my windows open, and I would hear everything of their fighting coming out of their own bedroom, or sometimes coming out of their bathroom. It was rough, and like I said, I felt really bad for their teenage daughter. And again, like, we'd see them all outside yelling and screaming in the middle of the night, in the middle of the road, and like, it was not uncommon sometimes to see several men out there yelling and screaming and fighting with each other. People we didn't even recognize. So, I'm trying to think of anything else. I'm sure there's something that I'm forgetting. Oh, most recently, so we have speculated for a while now that our neighbors, even when we had the neighbors who lived in the house at the fire, him in particular, we speculated did some kind of drugs and was likely in a motorcycle gang, just because he would have buddies come over on their motorcycles, and he also had a motorcycle, and they always had matching vests. They were like these light brown vests that had patches on them and stuff, and they all matched. And I'm just kind of like, I think you guys are like canoodling here, but I'm staying out of it, right? Like, not my business. But when we first moved in, they walked past and asked my mother-in-law and sister-in-law if we were going fishing, which was just a really weird thing to ask. You're like, what? And then there's other times when he'd say, you guys going fishing? And we're like, the fuck are you talking about? No, we're not going fishing. You don't even have a tackle box. You don't have a fishing pole. You don't look like you're going fishing. And then there was another time I heard at the local gas station just up the street, some other guy in there talking to, and the people I seen in the gas station, I was like, these don't look like the kind of people that go fishing. And they were talking to each other, and they're like, you going fishing? And the other guy's like, yeah, I'm going this afternoon, or whatever. I'm like, I feel like that's lingo for drug dealing. I feel like that's what they're talking about here. I don't think they're talking about actually going fishing. I think they were feeling us out to see if we did the same kind of stuff that they did, if we were going to go fishing. If I just said yes, I'd have showed up with a tackle box and a fishing pole, and they probably would have been hella confused and probably laughed their asses off, because I get the feeling they don't do the same kind of fishing that I do. So, we have speculated for a long time now that our neighbors at least do drugs, if not dealing drugs. And we say that because and I don't know what kind, it could be marijuana, which I think it should be legalized anyways, but I don't think it should be getting sold in the back alley. Like, I think it should be like properly done, FDA approved, so you know what's in it, kind of stuff. So, and the only issue I have with their smoking marijuana is that they smoke some stinky shit. Like, oh, it's awful. And I was young once. I mean, I never smoked myself, but I've been around people who smoked, and I've smelt better stuff than what they got. We're gonna find someplace else to film because this guy is not having it. I apologize. I did not make my bed very well this morning, though you guys can't really tell, but it's messy up there. I wasn't planning on filming in here. Granted, my dining room's a mess anyways, so I don't know why I'm apologizing. Also, lighting isn't great in here. So anyways, we've speculated that the folks who are now our neighbors, now our next door neighbors, that they at least buy drugs if or not dealing drugs, because they have so much activity of people coming and going. And you see folks pull up there in some nice little cars that you're like, I'm pretty sure they don't live in this neighborhood. Like, and the way it works is like somebody will pull up, and sometimes it's in the front and sometimes it's in the back alley, but somebody will pull up and park, and then somebody from the house, whether it's one of the kids or one of the parents, will come out, pop in the car. They'll be in the car less than 5 minutes, and then they get out and go back inside and the car drives off. And that is all day long. And if that doesn't send red flags to anybody, like, I'm like, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. But growing up, there was a drug dealer who lived across the street from us. And one thing that I noticed is that it's better to, at least growing up, I don't know that I agree with it now, it's better to live by the drug dealer than it is to live next to the user. Because the dealer will try to keep the street quiet. They don't want any red flags, they don't want anything to send the police towards them. Whereas the user is all about doing the partying, and they're going to trash a place, and they're going to make a lot of noise. Now the folks who live, because at one point we had the partiers who were trashing the place, loud music all the time, hit my dad's car at one point, stole stuff out of my dad's car. They were renters, thankfully. They got kicked out, moved out, evicted. I don't know, but they left. They weren't there very long, 6 months to a year. Then we had the biggest drug dealer for the south side of my town move in across the street from us. And I didn't know that until somebody from school told me, because apparently their parents bought off this person. And this guy, I mean, it was coming and going all the freaking time, but the place was kept quiet. It was like, you come get your shit and you leave. Just like how it is over here. You pull in, you're there less than 5 minutes, you leave. But that guy kept things quiet. Like there was never any partying, never anything loud, no more than one car at a time. He definitely tried to keep things fairly inconspicuous. Which in comparison to the users, we were like really, you know, not enjoying them as our neighbors. And so with the folks next door here, I speculate if they aren't using and dealing at the same time, because they've got the same kind of activity coming and going with people coming, they hop in the car and then leave all within like 5 minutes. A lot of these things take 2 to 3 minutes. We're like, why are you hopping in somebody's car for 2 minutes? Like, it's how much activity is kind of crazy. But they're also hardcore partying, and they're drinking all the time, and they're smoking their own dope, and they're fighting with each other, and I don't know, like, the police have been called on them. I've seen the cops out there a few times myself. I've called the cops a few times myself, and I don't know how they get away with it. My neighbor, the man, was arrested at one point for marijuana. I seen him in the paper, but he didn't serve any major jail time. Like, he was back home within a few days. So at some point you just stop caring and you stop calling it in, because it's like, what's the point? Because I have made anonymous calls before to the police about what's going on, and like nothing's ever come of it. So it's like, whatever, you know. So I think I was getting at something. Oh, the most recent story, and we're gonna wrap things up here because I'm gonna have to get my oldest boy from school soon, is my husband and I were in our garage, okay? And we have recently, it's a detached garage, and we turned it into like a theater room, like a place we can hang out, watch movies. And so we were out there, we had a movie going, and we were canoodling, okay? Kid free time, you know what I'm saying? And we hear a truck pull up outside of our garage, and we hear, well, at least I'm assuming a truck. Like, I didn't see this, I just heard it. But it sounded like a truck, and the door slams shut really hard, and then I start yelling at my neighbor, a man, and he had like I don't know how else to say it other than he had like a really thick ghetto accent. So I wasn't picking up everything that he was saying, but what I was catching on was, where the F is my money? I need my effing money. Where's my money? And my neighbor last year had a stroke, and I think that's why things have really quieted down, is because he doesn't speak super good anymore. So I feel like maybe him and his wife just don't fight as much. So sometimes I do hear fights. We heard a fight the other night, and I couldn't tell what it was about other than what I heard her say. I hope to God is not correct, but it sounded like she said, I didn't F your baby. That's what it sounded like she was yelling back at him. And I'm like, I hope I'm not hearing that correctly. Because when she gets super mad and yelling, sometimes it's hard to understand what she's saying either. And since her husband's had his stroke, he's pretty much fully recovered, but he still doesn't speak very well. So I wasn't exactly sure what I was hearing. I know there's been times I've heard them fighting and her accusing him of cheating, and there's been other times before his stroke I've heard them fighting and I've heard him accusing her of cheating. And we're talking about the mom and dad who own the property, not baby mama and baby daddy, not their son. So I don't know what it was I heard. I'm just like, oh dear Lord, I hope I didn't hear what I think I heard. So anyway, this most recent incident was behind my garage, and who I'm assuming is probably either their drug dealer or their supplier. I'm thinking maybe supplier. My thoughts on it is that they probably have a supplier, and then they also use X amount of the drugs that they get, and then they also are selling. Because living in a low-income house, is it called HUD housing? They don't have jobs. They're on Social Security because they're disabled. I think it's because of being alcoholics that they are considered disabled. But I'm like, there's no way that being on SSI that they're making enough money to afford the amount of alcohol that they're drinking from being on SSI. Like, it's got to be something else, right? Like, something else has to be supplementing their income. And my thoughts is that they're probably dealing drugs. So they're in the back alley behind my garage, and this guy is giving my neighbor the shakedown for his money that we're coming to terms with is probably over drugs. Just the gist of it that we're hearing and yelling. There was nothing in there particularly that said we need our drugs, or we need, you know, you owe me money for meth, or you owe me money for marijuana. Like, there's nothing specific said like that. But like, why else are you going to give somebody the shakedown in a back alley behind somebody's garage where nobody can see you about money, unless you don't want anybody knowing you're giving somebody the shakedown about money because it's something illegal. That's my thoughts on it, and just putting it together with all of the activity we see next door, it's kind of like, So we're pretty well on assumption that they at least do the drugs, might be dealing the drugs, not really sure. But kind of freaked me and my husband out. Like I said, we were canoodling back there, and we were just very quietly like putting our pants back on and moving away from the back garage door in case bullets started flying, because we're like, why are you doing this behind your own house? Do it behind your own. You have your own garage. You can be doing the shakedown. You don't need to do it behind ours. I don't know why you're doing it back here. So crazy neighbors. There's probably more stories that I am drawing a blank on. Like I said before, with the house that had the house fire, you had the original neighbors there, and they got evicted because husband and wife broke up, and wife got a new boyfriend, and they're doing meth together, and she quit going into work, and then she got evicted from the house because she quit making the house payments. So somebody else moved in, and these people were just strange. Like, the first day I met the husband, hadn't met any of them at all. First day I met the husband, he asked for my Wi-Fi password. I was out in my front yard doing something, sweeping my porch off, I don't know, and he's like, do you live here? And I'm like, yeah. And this happened like 3 years ago now, so I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. But he's like, do you live here? And I'm like, yeah. And he's, oh, I'm your neighbor. I just moved in. Shakes my hand. We introduce each other. And he's like, can I have your Wi-Fi password? And I'm like, I'd have to ask my husband. And he's like, where's your husband? I'm like, in the house. And he points at my house and says, well, go get him. And I'm like, first time ever meeting this guy, right? And I'm like, well, he's sleeping. And he gives me a look like, And he's like, well, our Wi-Fi won't get hooked up until Wednesday, and the kids are going crazy without the TV. So if I could really have your Wi-Fi password, that would be great. I'm like, what the fuck? And then there was other times I was outside playing with my kids. Well, at the time I only had Levi, so my kid. And he would make a comment about Levi's toy that he was playing on, because we didn't have like a fence between the yards. And he'd say, when you're done with that, can I have it for my kids? No, you can't have it for your kids. My kid's still young enough to be playing with it. I'm not just gonna like give it away to you. Like, go away. Okay? Like, he was just weird. Like, I've never met somebody who just blatantly asked for somebody's Wi-Fi password. Like, hi, my name's so-and-so. Can I have your Wi-Fi password? The fuck you can? How about you go away? And then to tell me to go get my husband. Like, boy, bye. No, you're not getting my Wi-Fi password. Again, I wish I'd had more of a backbone. I wish I could say now that I have a good backbone, but I don't know that I really do. I'm kind of a weenie, if I'm being honest with you. Kind of a weenie. I don't like confrontation. I try to avoid it at all cost. So, what else? I'm sure that there are more stories I could tell, but I think we're going to wrap things up right here. So, thank you for watching if you're new. If you are new, hope you take the time to check out my channel, see if there's anything else you'd like to watch. I will leave links down below to my Q&A mukbang, if mukbangs are something you're enjoying and you want to see another one. And also links for the firehouse story times of all of that craziness. And if you've been with me for a long time, I want to say thank you so much for watching and supporting me. You guys know how much it means to me and my family. Doing YouTube really helps me to be a stay-at-home mom and to help support my family while keeping my kids out of daycare and all of that stuff. So thank you so much for watching and supporting, and I hope to catch you guys in my next video. Bye.